Welcome to Anti-Hedge. You're speaking to the founder, Matt, once again, here to bring you another educational crypto video. First things first, I just gotta say one thing. This is not financial advice. We do not accept any liabilities for losses that you may incur. And all these videos are for educational, research, and news purposes. So with that in mind, you should be able to enjoy this next video. And this one is just gonna be about a general market update. I'm gonna keep it brief because there's a few subjects that I wanted to touch on today. Basically, what I wanted to start was with the fact that the SEC has recently threatened to sue Coinbase over its lend feature. This is interesting because this is the first time the SEC is actually going to be targeting a crypto platform for reasons other than securities. And it's interesting because Coinbase is taking an approach, one of the first approaches to becoming a crypto bank. And it's wild to think that the SEC is now overreaching into that territory and basically attacking them, even though they've been, proactively trying to engage with the SEC to make sure that everything is compliant. And it's crazy because Coinbase is definitely one of the most compliant of the exchanges, and the SEC is starting to threaten them based off of a 4% APY on USDC coins, which is kind of ridiculous because a regular savings account will give you 0.25% interest on whatever you're holding, and this one is offering 4%. So it's a no-brainer just to sit there and take the 4% over 0.25% in a traditional fund. And I think what you're starting to see now is that the SEC is starting to realize that it's being left behind, like a dinosaur after, a big meteor crash, which is probably sad for all these old institutions like the SEC, where they're looking at that and going, maybe we should have gotten on board and, done something about crypto earlier. Because now, at the rate in which they're going to be trying to do things, it's going to be basically like, just watching basically something deteriorate into dust. Because if they can't keep up with how the times and the technologies are going, it's not going to be so good for them. And the reality is that as all these cryptos change, and we've seen it with the Ripple case. Ripple literally changed to a utility, and now the whole lawsuit gets basically thrown out. So as long as crypto and DeFi and all these things have new innovative ways to continue, they're not really ever going to regulate it in time. And what you're going to see is they're just always going to be a few steps behind, and they'll eventually, suffer from that as these new systems basically take over because they're just so much faster. The way I see it is the SEC is starting to realize that there's not much it could do, and crypto is going to happen, and they're just going to have to start opening branches for the SEC to have more and more crypto written within it, which could be good, it could be bad, we don't exactly know, but we'll leave that there for future reference. And the other thing I wanted to mention was Walmart. So Walmart recently started looking into basically getting a crypto product manager, or rather someone who basically specializes in these transactions, like crypto transactions specifically. And granted, it's a little bit old in news, it was in August, but the reality is that if all these large companies like Walmart and probably a few others are getting people to process these transactions, opening up a whole part of their firm or their company to be able to handle that, it just goes to show that there's definitely a possibility for them to either have already been entering, maybe this last market dip was them entering and it hasn't been announced yet, or the alternative is that they'll eventually just accept that Bitcoin and all these cryptos will be a currency. So it's almost as if like they're preparing or they're about to publicly announce that they're in. I'm not sure which it's going to be, but I have a feeling it's coming. But keep in mind, that's an opinion. It's not confirmed yet. And basically, the last thing I wanted to mention, and this one's not actually, it's not actually crypto related, but I wanted to just mention something. It's about the housing market in Montreal/Canada. And, I've mentioned it before in the past that, in Canada right now, housing going up 30 or 40% in less than 2 years isn't exactly sustainable. So I'm going to give you my take on it because it's a pretty well-informed, well-read take Obviously, once again, not advice, but an opinion, an educated opinion. And more or less what I wanted to mention is that right now we're starting to see a slowdown in basically this buyer's market. And we've seen, as these prices have skyrocketed, Canada's GDP related to housing and, real estate has hit a staggering 9.5%. That is huge for any country's GDP to have that much of its basically existence based off of real estate, retail real estate. That's insane. I don't know if you guys watched the U.S. subprime meltdown in 2008 that caused a huge financial collapse and ruin. That collapsed the American economy at 4.5%. So that should give you an idea of where we're at as Canadians to have such a high GDP reliant on people buying and, having these housing rates go. So it's a pretty big pill to swallow considering we're double the point and we're seeing a rent crisis in Canada where people can't even afford to pay their rent anymore. This is going to be a bubble. For me, the way I see it is I'll break it down in two ways. And the first one being is that we are in a bubble. We just don't know how high it could inflate. Because there was a whole book. I'd have to find the book's name and leave in the source for you guys at the end of this video. But it was a book about post World War I Germany. And they mentioned, or rather, it wasn't just about that, but they mentioned post World War I Germany in that book, and they basically said that people were seeing the value of their houses go up to millions of marks, and everyone was thinking, well, if our house is worth millions, we're rich, we should just sell it. And what did they do? They sold all their assets, not realizing that the mark was about to become valueless. And that was just a result of a really bad treaty that was signed and then became a huge shit show and allowed the people to be manipulated by, a psychopath. But the point is that we could be either in that kind of period where the inflation is getting so ridiculous that people won't actually realize what the value of their asset is, really, realized value of their asset is compared to a dollar that is only going down in purchasing power. So for people holding property, I wouldn't necessarily say sell. And people that are looking to get into property, this is where I'm going to say consider getting ready to buy. Because the second option, the second path that I'm visualizing in this landscape, not assuming that we just continue on the inflation rates and the bubble never pops. Because if it never pops, then it'll just go infinitely. And then the value of the asset will just become more and more valuable based off of a shit coin, like fiat currency. And basically the second option is that we could be in the middle of a huge, or rather in the middle of the beginning of the first, or of a major correction in housing. Because having it go up more and more and more, like at the rate it's going, like almost one straight line, there's always the possibility that it gets, it pops and we have another subprime meltdown similar to the US, and then a foreign entity buys it all up, which we've seen with Vancouver, where all of it was bought by China. We've seen it with Toronto, where a large portion of it was bought by China, and we're seeing now in Montreal, more and more of it's being bought by China. For Canadians, we got to start trying to get our politicians to reduce foreign buying in our country. Because if they pop the market and they buy everything, imagine what the rent prices will be when we're not in control of our own rents, where a Canadian isn't in control of your rent, where there won't be protection because it's not owned by our government anymore. Granted, yeah, I've deviated a lot from the crypto subject today, but I wanted to mention that because I felt it was necessary for people to hear that. Hold your assets. And if you're not holding assets, start holding them. Store of values, like not just NFTs and Bitcoin and stuff like that. Things like gold and actual assets like property and things like that. They're going to do okay against the dollar if the dollar keeps printing. So guys, like, comment, and subscribe if you like this video. definitely leave some love in the comments section if you enjoyed the information here. And I'm just going to mention one more time. That's my boys, Sunset Drip. Check them out. I'm going to leave a link in the source description for you guys so you can check them out. And I want you guys to have a great day.